Whilst the gameplay that you're about to see is from a story mission that also features a boss, you won't see gameplay of the boss fight and there will be no major story spoilers. Now then guys, you know the drill at this point. We're going to be showing all of VEX's abilities, the augments, the capstones, and I'm doing it within this campaign mission as part of the embargo called Rush the Wave. So there's no story spoilers in this, it's just me sort of running through the area after I've mostly cleared it. But this isn't a guide as such, and it's not me discussing what I think of the skill trees yet. But yeah, these videos are a lot of work. I enjoy doing it, but it's a lot of work and they're hard to make. So if you did enjoy this video, be sure to check out the other augment and ability videos for the other Vault Hunters, and like and subscribe of course as well. Before we get into the specific talent trees, let's start with the trait for VEX, which is Phase Covenant. When you are attuned, your abilities at least are attuned to the elemental type of your current gun. If you switch your gun, it's going to convert all action skill and melee damage into that elemental type, no matter which ability that you go for. But you see an on-screen example of Trouble, which is the Phase Familiar ability in the Here Comes Trouble red tree, where you're joined by a little minion that's going to help you out as much as they possibly can. They're typically going to try and do melee damage to enemies by running up to them, but they can do ranged attacks as well, although I don't know if there's a way to specify which kind of damage you want them to do. You can also tell which target you want Trouble to focus on by pressing the mouse button down and pinging them. But you can also press the action skill button to teleport Trouble to a position where you're looking, dealing damage in an area. Trouble then transforms into a badass, fully restoring health and also gaining increased damage for a duration of 20 seconds. The cooldown of this badass mode is 45 seconds however, and if Trouble dies you have to wait 20 seconds before he respawns, and you'll see that on the bottom left with the buffs what the cooldown is meant to be. If you activate the ability turning Trouble into a badass whilst they're dead, it will instantly respawn them too. But like in the other videos, you have augments and capstones that can change your how abilities work, and Phase Familiar is no exception. The first augment to highlight is Violent Outburst, where if you press and hold the action skill button down, you command Trouble to explode himself, dealing ordnance damage to all nearby enemies and restoring health to VEX. This will instantly kill Trouble if he's not in his Phase Familiar badass mode, so you have to wait that 20 seconds for him to come back, but if he is a badass, it sacrifices 33% of his maximum health instead. It also restores 75% of maximum health capacity for you. The second augment is Blink Strike. It's a command skill where when you press and hold the action skill button again, you tell Trouble to blink strike target enemies dealing damage. If that enemy is below 50% HP, it will critically strike them. It's kind of like a Shadow Step rogue from World of Warcraft kind of ability. But as we get further into the tree and it starts to branch off, we'll start with the left hand side with Hexus Nexus. This augment by default allows Trouble to taunt enemies, making him more likely to target him. And by the way, he does die pretty quickly, which, you know, Borderlands 3 players with Flak, you'll sort of know and experience this. But there is also the command skill, if you press and hold, to command Trouble to charge target enemies, dealing melee damage in a radius on impact, and also creating a singularity for a duration. The cooldown of this in particular is 45 seconds though, so you can't use this as often as some of the other augments. The middle branch augment is Vorpal Fang, where by default Trouble gains the chance to critically hit with all attacks, and if you press and hold F, you will command Trouble to summon phase daggers overhead that fire at nearby enemies, dealing melee damage on impact. It throws out 5 total. The duration is 15 seconds and there's a 35-second cooldown for it too. The final augment in this tree is Beast Mode, where you press and hold to command Trouble to enter Beast Mode, becoming immune to damage and gaining increased attack speed and movement speed for a duration. Also, if you get a kill whilst the Beast Mode is active, it extends the duration, but it doesn't say by how much. And also, there's not really any UI or any effects on Trouble to know that this augment is actually in play. But as you get even further towards the end of these trees, you start to get to some capstones. So going back over to the left hand side, we have Trouble Bubble, where Trouble now gains overshield whenever he deals damage. And whilst Phase Familiar is active when you turn him into a badass, he also gains an elemental aura dealing ordnance damage over time to nearby enemies. So again, because of the trait that VEX has, if you change to a corrosive element, it's going to create an elemental aura around Trouble, which is kind of nice for ranged enemies. The middle capstone is Double Trouble, where Trouble now gains a chance to create an illusion near the enemy when dealing damage, and critical hits have double that chance too. Illusions also become badasses when Phase Familiar is active. It is a 15% chance, so it's not very high, and even doubled with the critical hits, it doesn't seem that likely. You can have 3 maximum illusions pop out at once, So that's 4 total troubles running around. So you really need to build around like crit chance, and especially transferring that over to trouble to get really any good use out of this. Just trying to level with this felt a little bit like rough and not fun when you're hoping for something to happen, when so many other capstones just have it happen, you know? The final capstone, which I quite like, is Unsealed. Trouble will now mark his current target, causing them to take increased gun damage from Vex. You can see this kind of like purple effect around them, which is when they're marked. And whenever you kill a marked enemy, Trouble gains a stack of Unsealed for a duration, granting health regeneration and increased damage. While Face Familiar is active, Unsealed effects are doubled. So you can't really, again, see when this buff is on Trouble specifically, but you can see the buff in the bottom left-hand corner. Okay, the blue tree, 4th seal. The action skill is called Dead Ringer, where you can summon some minions. As you sort of press the action button, you can either left click or right click to get different ones. We'll start with the left click one, which is a Reaper. These guys are melee focused attackers. They taunt enemies, and they can also fly around as well, so they can move and get to ranged enemies and move across. You can also spawn a Spectre with a right click, which stay in place. They cannot move, and you don't really have any tools to be able to move them either, and they will just sit there and deal gun damage, kind of like a turret or a Zane clone. You get 3 charges of this at base level. You can throw them all at once if you want, and they have a 35-second cooldown. However, the duration works a bit differently. Instead of it being a set amount of time, as time goes on, the clones lose an ever-increasing amount of health per second, and of course they can take damage and get killed by enemies too. These minions do attune to whatever element your gun is, but they don't change in real time like Trouble does. If you have a radiation gun out and you put down a Spectre, it's going to do radiation damage, but as soon as you switch to a fire weapon, it will still stay as radiation. It depends on what element you have in your hand whilst you place it, on what element it's going to be. I also didn't mention before for Trouble, if you don't have an element equipped, if it's just kinetic damage, you'll spawn a purple minion, whatever that would be, and that just does kinetic damage instead. The first augment in this tree is Gas Blaster, where for Spectres, they gain the ability to use a Gas Blast, which deals gun damage to all nearby enemies on impact. They will use a Gas Blast either when they spawn or after they reload their gun. So if you go for a low reload gun, you might be able to just throw these out consistently. The second augment is Coven, where if you spawn a Reaper, it grants Vex and her minions health regeneration for a duration, and also if you spawn a Spectre, it grants you critical strike chance for a duration of 20 seconds. The maximum stacks that you can have are 3, and you can throw down multiple of these to just get those stacks instantly. You can also have both effects stacking together, if you want to have a couple of Reapers and 1 Spectre, for example. Going to the bottom left, we have Wither, which is a minion skill for Spectres exclusively, where they can cast Wither on an enemy when they spawn. It deals status effect damage over time, and it increases damage taken for a duration. You can sort of see the effect around them, and you can stack multiple of these on an enemy per elemental type. If you actually get a kill with the minions still alive, they will use Wither again on a new enemy. So the best way to use this is to have a fire gun equipped, put down a Spectre that will put a withered effect from the fire element, get a cryo weapon, put down a Spectre that will wither an enemy with a cryo effect, and you can stack it all on bosses, for example. So this might actually be a really, really cool augment to be using. And considering they take 30% extra damage, yeah, keep an eye on this one. The middle augment is Hellish Harvest, which is a minion skill for Reapers, where they gain the ability to use Hellish Harvest, which deals melee damage 3 times in a large area around themselves and regenerates health for each enemy hit. You can again see the gameplay of them just spinning around, and they will use Hellish Harvest on spawn and every 3rd time that they melee attack. And then we have Banshee's Wail, which is a minion skill for Reapers again, and they can now use Banshee's Wail periodically. It deals damage to nearby enemies, and also grants an overshield to yourself and nearby allies. It also says periodically, but the only time that I saw it used was every time that a Reaper spawns. I didn't see it used any other time, but there is a cooldown on it of 20 seconds, whether that's 20 seconds per minion. I think it's just 20 seconds full stop. But yeah, outside of them using it as soon as they spawn, I didn't see this effect any other time. But now the capstones. Left-hand side one is Heirloom, where Spectres gain a copy of Vex's currently equipped gun for a duration. Only 1 Spectre can have a copied gun at a time, and when you spawn a new Spectre, it will remove the copied gun from the previous Spectre and give it to the new one. There is also a duration of how long this effect lasts on the Spectre too, so if you have a gun, it's going to be 10 seconds before it goes back to their normal default one. This also means that for TDRs, for example, your minions do actually throw these out too, which is kind of nice. and the Spectres with your gun do 100% of the damage, so it's not reduced in any way. Zane fans rejoice, but it certainly doesn't seem as strong as some of the stuff that Zane had in Borderlands 3. Grim Reaper. You saw this one at the start of the video. Press and hold to spawn a Grim Reaper that drains nearby enemies, dealing status effect damage over time and regenerating health for each drained enemy. The cooldown for this one is 2 minutes, so it's super long. And when an enemy dies, there is a chance that a new Reaper will be spawned. Not a Grim Reaper, just a normal default one. And you can see that you can get multiple of these out, and if you're fighting multiple enemies, the Grim Reaper can last for quite some time. It is just a shame that the cooldown is significantly long for this. And then finally we have Dark Pact for this skill tree, which now Vex can equip 2 augments. All of the ones that we went over, you can now equip 2 instead of 1, and you also gain an ability called Dark Pact, where as your minions are losing health over time as their duration, you can use Dark Pact by pressing and holding the action skill to restore health to all of the clones that are alive, as well as granting increased movement speed and minion attack speed for a duration. There's a duration of 12 seconds where these minions won't lose health over time whilst this effect is active, but as soon as that duration runs out, the health loss is reset back onto the minion. So if a minion was 1 HP and then you use it, it will go back to full health for 12 seconds, and then it will go back to 1 HP and instantly reset once Dark Pact is over. They can just take damage as well from enemies, it's just that they don't lose health over time as part of their duration. I don't want to say too much about it yet, but I would say for this tree, this was one that I didn't really have many expectations going into playing. But once I actually got to try out some of the capstones, the ideas were like bubbling, right? Like there's so much cool stuff that you can potentially do. And honestly, I might pivot over to Vex being my main because of this reason. I think this tree is a lot. The third and final trait is Vescalation for Vex, and Incarnate is the action skill, and it comes in 2 parts. The first bit is when you activate it, it creates a phase explosion, dealing damage to nearby enemies, and it fully restores your health. You also gain increased movement speed, and you could use another ability called Eldritch Blast during the duration of it. Eldritch Blast is where you fire out this offhand blast, and it deals damage to nearby enemies on impact, and you can also deal gun damage with your normal gun, which will reduce the Eldritch Blast cooldown at default. You can also end it early if you want to, partially refunding some of the cooldown like other abilities. By the way, the cooldown of this ability is 55 seconds, so it is quite long. And you can throw out as many Eldritch Blasts as you want, but there is about a 7-second cooldown on this at base level. So the first augment that you'll come across is Geist Wave, that instead of having a big phase explosion happen, Vex launches a Geist Wave as you're seeing on screen, dealing ordnance damage to enemies that it passes through. Each affected enemy that it passes through takes increased damage for a duration too. The second augment is Energy Vampire, when Vex deals status effect damage to nearby enemies over time, and you also gain overshield for each enemy affected whilst Incarnate is active. The kill skill as well, if you kill an enemy whilst the action skill is active, it will grant a stack of Energy Vampire, increasing status effect damage, and these stacks are lost when Incarnate ends. You get 5 total, and you gain 10% status effect damage per stack. Going down to the left-hand side branch, we have Iron Maiden. Phase Explosion and Eldritch Blast restore shield for each enemy hit, and deal increased damage based on Vex's current shield. And that increased damage is 15% of current shield capacity, so that can scale up quite well. The middle augment is Witchy Triggerfinger, where dealing damage with Eldritch Blast or the Phase Explosion will fully refill ammo of Vex's current gun. And it also grants a stack of Witchy Triggerfinger, increasing gun damage for a duration. You can have 3 stacks of this total. The duration of the stacks is 15 seconds, and you get 15% gun damage per stack. The stacks of Witchy Triggerfinger will persist even after Incarnate ends. And the final augment to go over fully is Grave Harvest. It's a kill skill where killing an enemy whilst Incarnate is active will spawn a soul orb that deals status effect damage over time to nearby enemies for a duration. You could do 2 things with these soul orbs. You can either pick them up, which will restore health and action skill duration, or you can press E when you're looking at them at range to detonate them, dealing ordnance damage to enemies within that area. It restores 20% action skill duration, and you get 35% health back off of it too. But now the final capstones. On the left hand side we have Desecration. Phase Explosion and Eldritch Blast create hazards, dealing damage over time for a duration. Eldritch Blast is also now homing. If it hits an airborne enemy, it will burst after a delay, dealing damage to other nearby enemies. I don't know if I got gameplay of the last bit that much, but you do see the hazards on the ground when you use the explosion and also the blasts. The middle capstone is Vibe Check. Eldritch Blast is now a charge skill. Instead of just throwing out as many as you can within that time frame, you now get 3 maximum. After you activate Eldritch Blast, it will consume all charges to ricochet onto hitting an enemy. So it will ricochet once for each charge consumed. So essentially, if you use it straight away, you'll have 3 charges. It will bounce between 3 people and ricochet. But those charges will come back over time. So you can either fire them 1 at a time as soon as you get them, or you can wait until you get 2 to 3 stacks and have them ricochet again. And also when you do gun damage, the cooldown reduction is doubled, so you can just get more out. The final capstone is Heart Piercer, where Eldritch Blast, instead of having a cooldown, you can just keep throwing these out, but you instead start sacrificing 20% of current health. It also becomes a piercing wave that does damage to enemies, but also heals allies that it restores health to as it passes through. You also gain bonus damage and healing based on how much sacrificed health has gone through. 150% of sacrificed health, actually. So you can keep spamming these out. It won't kill you because it's 20% of current health, but it will have diminishing returns. So if you have a shield that brings you down to 1 HP, you're not going to get that much damage out of it. But that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. It's just AMON left to do. And then I feel like I could start playing the game again, because this has been like pretty much all I've been able to focus on over the last couple of days. But I hope you enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. And yeah, keep sharing it around, like, subscribe, all of that YouTube jazz, and I'll see you in the next one for AMON tomorrow. Bye!